Phillips 66 is shutting down its Los Angeles refinery this week, and California is about to lose 139,000 barrels per day of gasoline production. The Wilmington facility will begin idling units in stages throughout December, and the entire operation will be permanently shut down by the end of the year. According to sources cited by Reuters, that means 8.3% of California's total refining capacity will vanish within just a few weeks. By December 31st, 600 employees and 300 contractors will be out of work. Phillips 66 says only a small number of those workers will be reassigned to the company's marine terminal operations. That puts 900 families directly impacted right before the start of the new year. The company announced this decision back in October, blaming market conditions. But even with advance notice, the consequences are no less severe. California is now scrambling to replace the 1.3 billion gallons of gasoline this refinery produced each year. At the moment, the state imports roughly 1.1 billion gallons annually, which accounts for about 8% of its total supply. Once the Phillips 66 facility goes offline, that import dependence jumps to 17%. According to Skip York, chief energy strategist at Turner, Mason & Company, Californians need to understand where their gasoline will now come from. Vessel tracking data from K. Peeler shows California reached a 4-year high in May 2025, importing 279,000 barrels per day. About 70% of those imports came from South Korea and other Asian exporters. That equals roughly 187,000 barrels per day arriving from Asia alone. The remaining imports are coming from some surprising sources. India shipped 39,000 barrels per day of gasoline and alkylate in May, the highest level since January 2024. California even began importing fuel from the Bahamas, which shipping analysts say is normally far too expensive to make economic sense. One gasoline trader explained that sending a tanker from Texas to California via the Bahamas usually does not work financially, but refinery shutdowns opened arbitrage opportunities to the West Coast from virtually everywhere. A gasoline tanker traveling from Singapore to California takes between 30 and 40 days, according to York. That means the fuel you pump in February was likely loaded onto a ship back in December. Any disruption along the way, whether a typhoon, shipping delay, or port congestion, can add weeks to that timeline. Compare that to pipelines, which deliver fuel continuously, or rail shipments that take days rather than weeks. California has 0 pipelines connecting it to other refining regions. None from Texas, none from the Gulf Coast, nothing. The state operates as what analysts call a fuel island. Every gallon of imported gasoline must arrive by ocean tanker. The Jones Act makes shipping between U.S. ports prohibitively expensive unless American-flagged vessels are used, and there are only 55 petroleum tankers like that in the entire country. Not every refinery can produce California gasoline. The state requires a special formulation known as CARBOB, which stands for California Reformulated Blendstock for oxygenate blending. Only a limited number of refineries worldwide have the equipment needed to make this specific fuel. Phillips 66 plans to produce some California-grade gasoline at its Washington refinery, and, certain refineries in India and South Korea can also meet these specifications. According to the Energy Information Administration, Sumit Ritolia of Kapler told reporters that California's refining capacity is shrinking faster than fuel demand is declining, forcing the state into long-term import dependence. The California Energy Commission projects that by 2026, as much as 30% of the state's gasoline demand will need to be met through imports, particularly in Northern California. Wholesale rack prices are now experiencing sharp daily swings as traders react to tightening supplies. In some cases, wholesale margins have surged past 90 cents per gallon, more than double typical levels, driven by reduced output and delays in replenishing supply through imports. According to Mansfield Energy's July 2025 analysis, California gasoline prices averaged $4.68 per gallon when imports peaked in May, while the national average was $3.12, based on GasBuddy data. That's a difference of $1.56 per gallon. Patrick DeHaan of GasBuddy warned that increased reliance on waterborne imports will push fuel costs higher in the nation's most populous state. He noted that the emergence of unusual trade routes shows California still has supply options, but at significantly higher prices. The tankers delivering fuel to California are not American vessels. According to energy analyst Edward Ring, more than 95% of California's inbound crude oil and gasoline supplies arrive by maritime tanker, and most of those ships are not U.S. flagged. This includes vessels owned by Russia's Sovcomflo Group and China's COSCO Shipping Energy Transportation. These tankers burn heavy fuel oil, a thick, tar-like residue left over after refining other petroleum products. The environmental cost is substantial. Tankers emit about 50% more carbon dioxide per barrel mile than pipelines or rail transport. Analysis from Lloyd's List Intelligence shows that a 40-day voyage burning heavy fuel oil adds significant costs that ultimately show up at the pump. Phillips 66 is not the only refinery shutting down. Valero's Benicia refinery near San Francisco is scheduled to close in April 2026, removing another 145,000 barrels per day of capacity. Combined, these two closures eliminate roughly 20% of California's total refining capacity, about 290,000 barrels per day, within a 6-month span. Ryan Cummings of the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research warned that conditions could deteriorate rapidly. Without an increase in import capacity to replace the lost production, especially heading into the summer driving season, Californians should expect a material rise in prices. California doesn't just need to import more gasoline, it also needs somewhere to store it. Benicia Mayor Steve Young revealed in December that state officials approached the city about converting the closing Valero refinery into an import storage hub. The proposal would create storage capacity for up to 20 years, but Young called it a terrible situation because it would generate no jobs, no tax revenue, and continuous emissions from tanker traffic. Meanwhile, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are dealing with new regulations that require tankers to use shore power electricity while docked. If importers struggle to comply, it could restrict fuel flows and increase pass-through costs. According to the California Energy Commission, the state is attempting to increase imports while simultaneously making it more expensive and complex to receive them. California's growing dependence on imports creates multiple vulnerability points. About 22.3% of the state's foreign crude comes from Iraq, 16.9% from Ecuador, and 16.4% from Saudi Arabia. Any disruption in those regions directly affects California's fuel supply. Tankers must also navigate choke points like the Strait of Malacca and face weather risks in the Pacific. The February 2025 fire at PBF Energy's Martinez refinery highlighted this vulnerability when California was forced to import emergency supplies from South Korea and the Gulf Coast at premium prices. With refineries operating near full capacity and minimal buffer between supply and demand, any unexpected disruption leads to immediate price spikes. The Energy Information Administration has warned that sudden shortfalls could result in temporary price increases and heightened volatility. Michael Misch of USC's Marshall School of Business calculated that Californians already pay an extra $600 to $1,000 per year for gasoline compared to the national average. As import dependence grows, those costs are likely to increase. Every gallon delivered by tanker instead of refined locally adds transportation expenses, storage costs, insurance, and risk premiums. According to the California Energy Commission, the state consumes about 38 million gallons of gasoline every day, or 13.8 billion gallons annually. With the Phillips 66 closure eliminating 1.3 billion gallons of yearly production, California must replace nearly 10% of its total consumption. As Phillips 66 winds down operations this month, California is entering uncharted territory. The state had 40 refineries in 1983. Today, it has just 8. After Phillips 66 shuts down, that number drops to 7. After Valero closes, it falls to 6. Each closure makes the remaining refineries more critical and any disruption more damaging. The Energy Information Administration forecasts higher gasoline prices on the West Coast next year, even as prices fall elsewhere in the country. California's unique combination of no pipelines, specialized fuel blends, declining refinery capacity, and rising import dependence is creating a perfect storm for persistently higher prices. Drivers filling their tanks this week are witnessing the beginning of California's shift from a fuel-producing state to a fuel-importing state, and that shift will be measured in dollars at every gas pump.